The first light of dawn spreads slowly across the Angolan hills, softening the jagged silhouettes of acacia trees and the rounded curves of distant ridges. The air is dry and fragrant with dust, carrying the faint scent of crushed leaves and parched earth. It whispers of journeys long past, of footsteps that pressed into the soil before the sun had ever risen. Along these plains, where the sun scorches the earth, the salt roads of the Mbundu traders once wove like invisible threads. They connected the shimmering flats of Kisima to the royal heart of Mbundu, carving pathways through lands both harsh and sacred. These roads were not paved with gold, nor lined with shade trees. They were built by human endurance, by the sweat and blood of those who bore the weight of survival itself. The salt carried along these roads was more than a commodity. It was life distilled into crystals, power manifested in grain, a fragile yet enduring symbol of wealth and dominion. To walk these roads was to witness the meeting of human labor, nature's cruelty, and the silent governance of unseen spirits. The traders arose before the sun, their bodies already disciplined by repetition and hardship. Bundles of salt were wrapped in palm mats, balanced carefully on shoulders and backs. Bare feet pressed into the dust, leaving ephemeral prints that the next wind could erase. Yet each footprint mattered. It was a record, a testament to the courage and patience of a people bound to the land. Every step was accompanied by song or whispered prayer. Some sang for protection, some for strength, some to honor ancestors who had once walked these same paths. The air shimmered with heat by mid-morning, and yet silence often dominated, the kind of silence that was both contemplative and necessary, a rhythm of survival. The salt roads were lined with dangers that tested the limits of endurance. Bandits hid in the dunes, predators waited near waterholes, and the sun itself became an adversary. Traders learned to negotiate each mile with careful attention, to measure their steps, to conserve strength. Rest was calculated, not leisure. Speech was measured, not indulgent. The journey demanded humility, awareness, and resilience in equal measure. At night, when the world softened under the stars, fires flickered along the caravans. Muscles were massaged with herbal oils, wounds washed with brine, and meals shared with careful gratitude. Stories were exchanged, not always of the day's suffering, but of ancestors, omens, and the secret spirits said to accompany travelers. The salt itself was sacred in a way the uninitiated could not perceive. It could heal, sustain, and protect, yet also burn and wound if mishandled. It was both currency and covenant, binding the traders to the land, to their labor, and to the unseen authorities of their society. Every grain carried memory of toil, endurance, and survival against the indifferent vastness of the landscape. The merchants of Luanda, sitting in shaded forts, rarely glimpsed this human reality. For them, salt was a number, a commodity to be weighed and counted. For the Mbundu, it was history, spirituality, and livelihood, all crystallized in each laboriously carried bundle. The early dawns and blazing noons, the perilous nights and shifting sands, all of it conspired to forge endurance. Walking these roads was a rite, a discipline, a meditation of flesh and spirit. And at the heart of this network of labor and resilience was the sovereign authority who understood the power embedded in these roads, Queen Ninga, whose wisdom and strategy would shape not only the salt trade but the destiny of her people. Every step across the sunlit plains, every campfire conversation, every silent prayer, it was all part of a living memory. These roads carried more than salt. They carried the essence of a civilization's persistence, a story encoded in dust and crystal. endurance, and faith. And so, as night settles, let your mind wander these paths. Feel the weight of the salt, hear the murmur of the caravan, sense the whispering of ancestors. History is alive here in the steps of those who endured, in the sun-scorched earth, in the crystal grains that bear witness to everything. If this story has moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more journeys into the heart of history. Thank you for watching. You are now under baobab skies, and the story begins now. The first light of dawn brushes the plains with pale gold, casting long shadows across the rolling hills of Mbundu. Imagine this scene. Bare feet press into the cracked earth as long lines of traders unfurl across the horizon. Heavy palm mats, woven and filled with precious salt, are strapped to their shoulders and backs. The weight bends their bodies, a silent testament to the incredible labor that survival demands. This isn't just a journey, it's a ritual of endurance. The air is dry, sharp with the scent of dust and sun-baked soil. The traders move in a quiet, steady cadence. Some hum soft invocations, ancient melodies passed down through generations. Others whisper prayers to the ancestors who once walked these very same paths, their spirits believed to still linger in the wind and the earth. The sun hasn't even fully risen, yet the heat is already a palpable force, conspiring against them, testing their resolve from the very first step. Each step these traders take is a negotiation between the body and the will. Every mile they cover is a measurement of the incredible patience of the human spirit. Imagine the physical toll, feet blistered from the rough terrain, backs aching under the constant, heavy load, and eyes burning from the relentless glare of the sun. Yet the caravan endures. They endure because endurance itself is their covenant, a sacred promise made to their families, their community, and themselves. These roads they travel are not just dirt paths. They are alive with memory. The wind has shaped the dunes over centuries, carving deep shadows into the earth that shift and change with the sun. It's said that the spirits of the land accompany every traveler, invisible guardians who are ever vigilant. A single misstep, a word of complaint, even a moment of carelessness could be seen as an invitation for misfortune, a sudden, blinding sandstorm, or, worse, an ambush from bandits lurking near the few precious river crossings. This journey is as much a spiritual pilgrimage as it is a physical one. By midday, the sun is a merciless tyrant, scorching the plains into a shimmering, hazy expanse of heat. The salt in their bundles glitters, white and blinding under the intense light, seeming to reflect pain with each and every footfall. To cope, the traders cover their faces with cloth, muttering charms passed down to ward off madness and fatigue. They understand a dangerous paradox. To rest is a risk, but not to rest is also a risk. Rest for too long, and thirst might claim them. Move too fast, and collapse is inevitable. Their world narrows, becoming a profound study in endurance, measured not in hours or miles, but in grains of salt, droplets of sweat, and the steady, rhythmic beat of determined footsteps. Silence often becomes their closest companion. Words are a luxury, and speech is a distraction from the intense discipline required simply to survive. As night finally falls, it softens the harsh edges of the world. Campfires begin to flicker to life, looking like stars that have fallen to earth. This is a time for healing and community. Aching muscles are massaged, wounds are carefully washed and tended to, and the precious bundles of salt are inspected for any damage from the days-long trek. Around the warm glow of the fires, stories begin to circulate. They speak of powerful ancestors, of omens seen in the flight of a bird or the shape of a cloud, and sometimes of ghosts who are said to walk silently beside the living. Each tiny grain of salt they carry seems to hold a memory of suffering, of patience, and ultimately of the triumph of the human will. The traders sleep under the vast, wide-open skies, their dreams mingling with the whispering winds that sweep across the plains. They know the next day promises more of the same, more sun, more dust, and more distance stretching between them and the river where their journey began. But the will to endure is a force stronger than the heat or the fatigue. It's a strength that is written into their very flesh, their hearts, and their spirits. It's a legacy they carry with every step. These salt roads of Ndongo were more than just trade routes. They were the very veins of civilization, a network connecting distant peoples, powerful rulers, and entire kingdoms. Merchants in bustling markets, middlemen negotiating deals, and even queens in their royal courts depended on the salt that traveled along these paths. But for the men and women who walked them, it was less about commerce and more about a profound ritual. It was a pilgrimage, a deeply personal negotiation with nature and the unseen spiritual world. Every single day was a test of their patience, and every mile they crossed was a measure of their faith. And so, the caravan presses onward, step after determined step, as the sun once again begins its slow climb toward noon. Dust rises from the dry earth in thin, hazy clouds, and the salt from their sweat and their cargo clings to their skin. The land stretches before them, seeming absolutely endless. Yet, within this vast, challenging landscape, every footfall tells a story. Every breath is a testament to their strength. And every single grain of salt they carry is a witness to their incredible journey. Let's pause here for a moment and really consider the world these traders inhabited. It's a world where the physical and spiritual were deeply intertwined. The success of their journey didn't just depend on their physical strength or the amount of water they carried. It also depended on their relationship with the land, their ancestors, and the spiritual forces they believed governed their world. This understanding adds such a rich layer to their story. It transforms them from simple traders into pilgrims on a sacred mission, where every element of their environment had meaning and significance. Think about the psychology of such a journey. The constant, gnawing presence of thirst and exhaustion. The mental fortitude required to push through pain day after day. The reliance on community and shared ritual to maintain morale. This wasn't a solitary struggle. The humming, the prayers, the shared stories around the campfire, these were all essential tools for survival. As important as the mats that held their salt, they were reinforcing their shared identity and collective will to succeed against overwhelming odds. This communal strength was their greatest asset. The salt itself is a powerful symbol. In this context, it's not just a commodity. It represents life, preservation, and wealth. But it's also a source of immense suffering. It's heavy, it blinds them under the sun, and it's the very reason for this arduous trek. The salt is both the burden and the prize, the cause of their pain and the reason for their hope. This duality is at the heart of their experience. Each grain that reaches its destination is a symbol of a battle won against the elements, against fatigue, and against despair. And what about the landscape? The Angolan plain is not just a backdrop. It's an active participant in this drama. The sun, the wind, the dust, they are characters in this story, forces that the traders must constantly negotiate with. The land itself is a living entity with its own memories and spirits. This perspective is so different from a modern, purely transactional view of trade. For the Mbundu traders, the journey was a dialogue with the world around them, a world that was very much alive and aware. The end of the day brought not just rest, but a renewal of spirit. The night, with its cool air and starry sky, offered a reprieve and a chance for connection. The act of tending to each other's wounds, of sharing food and stories, was a powerful affirmation of their humanity in the face of such a dehumanizing ordeal. It was in these quiet moments that they rebuilt their strength, not just in their muscles, but in their hearts. They reminded each other of why they were there and who they were doing it for. This nightly ritual of community and care was the glue that held the caravan and their spirits together. As we imagine them finally reaching their destination, the markets where the salt will be traded, we can appreciate the full weight of their accomplishment. It wasn't just a delivery of goods. It was the culmination of an epic journey, a testament to a culture of resilience and faith. The value of that salt was measured not just in what it could buy, but in the sweat, the prayers, and the sheer force of will that it took to get it there. Their story is a powerful reminder of the deep, often hidden, human histories behind the commodities that shape our world. The sun climbs higher, and the world is painted in blinding white and ochre. Imagine this: the heat isn't just a feeling, it's a physical weight. Salt, carried in heavy bundles, presses down on their backs, a constant reminder of the journey's purpose. The horizon isn't a straight line, but a shimmering, dancing wave of heat, playing tricks on the eyes. Across this vast, unforgiving landscape, the caravans move. They don't rush. They flow like slow, patient rivers, their rhythm dictated not by desire or impatience, but by a deep, ingrained discipline passed down through generations. Let's pause here for a moment. Imagine the fire crackling softly. The day's heat has faded, and we can finally rest, looking up at a sky filled with stars. Every step is an act of will. Blisters bloom on the soles of their feet, raw and angry against the sun-baked earth. Their hands, which carry the wealth of the land, are cracked and dry. Their shoulders are raw from the constant, unforgiving bite of the straps. And yet, the traders endure. They don't scream or curse the heavens. Instead, a soft chant rises from the line, a low hum of ancestral names whispered into the wind. They are invoking unseen spirits, calling on the strength of those who walked this path before them, asking for protection in a world that offers little. This isn't just a job. It's a spiritual pilgrimage, a test of faith with every single step. The roads themselves are a constant threat. This isn't a paved highway, it's a treacherous path fraught with peril. Bandits, patient as vultures, hide among the dunes, their eyes scanning the caravan, waiting for a single misstep, a moment of weakness. The rivers they must cross are a gamble, one day shallow and welcoming, the next a raging, unpredictable torrent. Their placid surfaces hiding treacherous sandbars that can swallow a man whole. The sun's glare is a weapon, capable of blinding a traveler and leading them astray. The wind is a thief, stealing the precious moisture from their lungs with every breath. And the nights, oh, the nights bring their own cruel paradox. After a day of scorching heat, the temperature can plummet, bringing a biting, freezing cold that seeps into their bones. Let's pause here for a moment. Can you hear it? The fire crackles softly, a small beacon of warmth as we rest together beneath the vast, silent stars. Even the salt, their very reason for being here, is a treacherous companion. A single crystal, spilled on cracked skin, burns with an agonizing fire. Pressed to lips, parched and split by the sun, it stings with a sharp, cruel pain. It is a constant source of discomfort, a reminder of the body's fragility. And yet, this same treacherous substance is life itself. It preserves the meat that sustains them, seasons the food that gives them strength, and builds the kingdoms that await their return. Every single crystal they carry is imbued with value, with pain, and with the weight of history. It's more than a mineral. It's the crystallized sweat and spirit of the people who carry it. Now picture the other end of this trade route. In the bustling coastal forts, merchants gather. To them, salt is a number on a ledger. Its profit, a commodity to be measured, weighed, and exchanged for gold or cloth. They see the neat piles, the organized shipments, but they rarely, if ever, see the human reality behind it. They don't see the blisters, the cracked hands, the spirits invoked under a blazing sun. For the Mbundu traders, however, this is not a commodity. It is endurance made tangible. It is spirituality in motion. It is their legacy, carried on their own backs, one painful step at a time. The disconnect is staggering. One sees profit, the other sees their soul. As dusk finally settles, it brings a small, merciful relief from the tyranny of the sun. The caravan halts, camps are set with practiced efficiency. Fires are lit, their flames dancing against the encroaching darkness, pushing back the shadows and the cold. This is a time for healing. Herbal pastes, smelling of earth and resilience, are gently applied to raw, chafed skin. Wounds are tended to with a careful, almost sacred touch, and as the men and women gather around the flames, something magical happens. Stories begin to circle the fire. Not idle chatter, but whispered histories, legends of great ancestors, and crucial advice for the miles that still lie ahead. It's a classroom, a hospital, and a sanctuary, all illuminated by the flickering firelight. Let's pause here, just for a moment longer. The fire crackles, a soft, rhythmic sound. We are safe here, resting together beneath the infinite canopy of stars. For a few precious hours, the caravan rests under the starlight. Their bodies are pushed to the edge of exhaustion, but their spirits remain vigilant, ever watchful. This journey is etched into them. Every movement, every load they've carried, every mile they've walked is recorded not just in their minds, but in the very crystal grains of the salt they transport. The salt road is more than a pathway. It's a teacher, and its lessons are harsh but profound. It teaches patience in the face of agonizing slowness. It teaches endurance when every muscle screams to stop. And it teaches the true, unvarnished limits of human resolve, pushing them to a point they never thought they could reach, and then showing them they can go further still. As the night deepens, a soft wind rises. It sighs through the camp, carrying fine sand and dust that finds its way into the simple tents and over the dying embers of the fires. It's a restless sound in a restless land, but the traders sleep lightly. They have learned to live in this state of constant awareness. An ear is always open, listening for the snap of a twig, the shift of the wind, the telltale signs of danger or the approaching dawn. They are always ready, always prepared to rise with the first hint of light, to shoulder their burdens, and to once again face the ochre plains, the shimmering heat, and the long, winding road ahead. Their journey is far from over. The road from the salt flats to the heart of Ndongo was long enough to break a man twice, first in body, then in spirit, and yet, somehow, they walked it singing. From the dawn mist, they rose like silhouettes carved out of silence, their backs bent beneath baskets glistening with the salt of the earth, each grain shining like a stolen piece of moonlight. To an outsider, their journey was a burden. To them, it was a ceremony. They did not call it labor. They called it Ukalanda, Ubumbo, the carrying of the world's bones. Because salt, they said, was the bone of the earth, the proof that even the sea could die and leave behind a memory. Each step was a verse, each footfall a rhythm of survival passed down through generations. The elders used to say, if you want to know the measure of a people, Watch how they walk when they are tired. The salt carriers walked as though tiredness was a language they had mastered and turned into poetry. Their sandals, made of cowhide stretched to its last life, were worn thin. Dust rose around them in pale clouds, catching the light like incense smoke in a temple. They walked through thornfields, across dry plains that cracked beneath the heat. The sun itself seemed to chase them, jealous of their endurance. And yet, at every stop, they gathered the way ancestors gather, forming a circle, breaking dry maize bread and sharing water that tasted faintly of the clay pots it had slept in. They would hum softly, a sound that was not quite singing, not quite silence, a hum that said, "We are still here." In the evenings, when the horizon softened and the sky bruised purple, they set camp. Fires flickered low. Someone would grind herbs into ash and rub it over sore shoulders, a ritual as old as memory itself. Their conversations were not many, but when they spoke, it was with the patience of rivers. They spoke of home, of wives waiting by the wells, of children learning how to shape clay pots, of debts owed and promises made. They spoke of rain that never came, and of ancestors who never stopped listening. They spoke of the salt itself, how it preserved fish, healed wounds, and cursed traitors. In the old tales, salt could bless or destroy. It was both a gift and a punishment, a double-edged inheritance. To carry it was to be both servant and guardian of life. That is why, when one of them stumbled, the others did not rush to lift him. They waited, because the road taught them patience, the earth taught them rhythm, and dignity that came from carrying what was heavy without complaint. When the first rains finally came after the long dry season, they did not run for cover. They lifted their faces to the sky and let the water carve rivers down their salt-streaked skin. The earth breathed again, and for a moment even the burden on their backs seemed lighter. Sometimes a man would die on the road, quietly, like a candle burning itself out. There was no wailing, no panic, only ritual. They would dig into the red earth with their bare hands, salt still strapped to their backs, and lay the man down, gently as if returning him to the very ground he had served. Then one of the elders would speak. Salt returns to salt. Sweat returns to dust. The world remains in balance. A handful of salt was sprinkled over the grave, not to preserve, but to honor, because to them, preservation was not about keeping the body whole. It was about keeping the story alive. At dawn, they walked on again, never backward, never empty. The salt they carried was currency, yes, but it was also a covenant. Every handful was a promise that no distance, no suffering, no empire could erase the dignity of a people who understood endurance. They reached markets where kings once traded ivory and copper. There, under wide acacia trees, merchants from distant lands waited with beads, cloth, and mirrors. The salt men came quietly, their faces unreadable, their voices low. They didn't barter like desperate men, they bartered like priests, performing a rite. To touch the salt was to touch what the ancestors had blessed. Buyers lowered their voices instinctively, as though in the presence of something sacred. Once, a Portuguese trader tried to mock them, calling their salt cheap earth. The eldest carrier said nothing. He merely took a pinch of salt, placed it on his tongue, and whispered, "It tastes like your sweat." Then he turned and walked away. Even the wind seemed to follow him with respect. Their journey was never about wealth. It was about legacy. When a young carrier joined for the first time, an elder would cut a line across his palm and press a few grains of salt into the wound. "So the road remembers you," he'd say. "And so your children will never forget that their father once carried the bones of the world." The wound would sting, but the boy would not flinch. because to show pain was to insult the ancestors who had carried heavier burdens and still sang. As the road stretched into months, their muscles turned to rope, their feet became maps of endurance. They began to read the land like scriptureware to find shade, where hyenas hunted, where water slept beneath dry stone. Even silence became their language. They could tell from the rhythm of a person's breathing if they were about to faint. They could tell from the tilt of a man's basket how close he was to surrender. But surrender was rare, because every grain of salt reminded them that time itself could be endured. At night, lying under stars that looked close enough to touch, they told stories. Stories of spirits who followed the salt road, invisible but watchful. Spirits of those who died mid-journey, still walking beside them in another realm. Don't whistle at night, they warned. It confuses the spirits. They might follow your sound instead of your shadow. There was comfort in such fear. It meant the world was still alive, that every footstep still echoed in the other world. In those stories, salt became a metaphor. It was the sweat of the first ancestors, spilled during creation. It was also their tears a reminder that to live was to give of oneself until only the purest essence remained. So when they finally reached home, they didn't celebrate loudly. They placed the salt before their families with quiet pride, as though presenting something divine. The women would anoint the baskets with oil, and the elders would pour libation to thank the earth for returning its children alive. And thus, the dignity of endurance was not learned in comfort, nor bought with gold. It was carved into calloused hands and blistered feet. It was sung in hoarse voices around dying fires. It lived in the way they walked, unhurried and unbroken, across lands that had forgotten mercy. It lived in the way they turned suffering into rhythm and weight into worth. It lived in the quiet understanding that pain, when carried with purpose, becomes legacy. In the villages of Ndongo, they say that when it rains and the air tastes faintly of salt, it is the earth remembering them, those who carried the burden with grace. And somewhere, deep beneath that soil, the bones of old carriers still rest, each grain of salt around them glowing faintly in the darker, silent testament to a people who learned to turn endurance into art. Because, in the end, salt melts, sweat dries, bodies decay. But dignity endures. The fires of war had barely cooled when Njinga Mbandi rose from the ashes of Ndongo's suffering. She had watched for years as the Portuguese built their forts along the Kwanza River, carving trade routes that seemed to drain the land of its very soul. They came for people, for ivory, and for salt, that white dust, more precious than gold in the inland kingdoms. But where other rulers saw only defeat and the slow collapse of their world, Njinga saw something else entirely. She saw a new weapon. In the evenings, she would often sit on the veranda of her compound in Kabasa, the capital, wrapped in the rich patterns of leopard skins. She would listen intently as traders, weary from their long journeys, recounted the desert's shimmer and the treacherous paths they walked. They spoke of the salt slabs carried from the coast, which glowed a soft, ethereal pink in the twilight. It was in these quiet moments of listening that a powerful idea took root in her mind. Njinga understood what few others could yet see. Whoever controlled the salt controlled thirst, and whoever controlled thirst could ultimately decide the fate of armies. Her first decree, when it came, was disarmingly simple. Every caravan that moved through her realm, no matter its origin or destination, owed a measure of its load to the royal storehouses. She called it a tribute, a fair price for safe passage. The Portuguese, predictably, called it theft. But they gravely underestimated the woman who spoke 3 tongues with fluency and whose mind was sharper and more dangerous than any soldier's sword. Let's just pause here for a moment. Imagine the scene. The fire crackles softly, casting dancing shadows. The vast African sky, studded with stars, stretches out above us. We're taking a moment to rest, to let the weight of this story settle in, just as Njenga would have done, gathering her thoughts under the same constellations. At the first light of dawn, her emissaries rode out. They headed south, toward the shimmering salt flats of Kizima, and west to the bustling, Portuguese-controlled ports of Luanda. At first, the salt merchants grumbled. This was a disruption to their established ways, a new tax on their profits. Yet, they obeyed. Why? Because Njenga's envoys didn't arrive with threats of violence. They carried not swords, but words. They brought promises of protection from bandits, guarantees of safe passage through treacherous territories, and the assurance of fair exchange. In a land that had been blistered by decades of betrayal and broken promises, Njenga was offering something rarer and more valuable than salt. She was offering order. Soon, the strategy began to bear fruit. Caravans from the inland markets of Matamba, a neighboring kingdom, began to move under her banners. Seeking the security her rule provided, the raw salt she taxed was brought to her storehouses, where it was refined, repacked into more manageable portions, and then sold again at a higher value to other traders. The profits were transformative. This new income fed the stomachs of her growing army of warriors and bought her crucial alliances with distant chiefs who were impressed by her foresight and power. In a matter of months, she had transformed a resource of scarcity into the very foundation of her sovereignty. Picture this: Queen Njenga, seated beneath a vibrant red cloth canopy, a symbol of her authority. Attendants gently fan her with palm leaves, stirring the warm Angolan air. Nearby, stacks of salt slabs, the source of her newfound power, stand as a testament to her genius, gleaming under the bright sun. This wasn't just a queen on a throne. This was a master strategist at work, orchestrating the future of her kingdom from the heart of her court. Meanwhile, in the coastal city of Luanda, the Portuguese governor watched these developments with growing frustration and alarm. Their great caravels sat low in the water, heavy with European goods they had brought to trade. But now, inland trade had slowed to a trickle. Their supply lines were being choked. Every shipment of goods, every caravan moving into the interior, now required Njenga's permission and her price. To proceed without it was to invite her anger, a risk few were willing to take. They tried to reason with her, to bend her to their will. They sent envoys bearing gifts of crucifixes and gold, hoping to soften her hand and appeal to her sense of piety or greed. She received them with impeccable grace, her eyes as calm and unreadable as deep river water, her words as smooth as oil. She listened to their proposals, smiled, and offered them hospitality. Yet, the moment they left her court, she would summon her scribes. She ordered them to note every detail about the men who had sat at her table, their vanities, their fears, the subtle rivalries between them. She was cataloguing the weaknesses of every man who thought he could outsmart her. Let's pause again for a moment. Can you hear it? The fire crackles softly once more, a steady, comforting sound. We're resting again beneath the canopy of stars, letting the story breathe, feeling the cool night air and the warmth of the flames as we contemplate the Queen's brilliant mind. Njenga had turned a simple commodity, salt, into a sophisticated intelligence network. Through her network of traders, tax collectors, and spies disguised as merchants, she knew everything. She knew when Portuguese garrisons were running low on food and supplies. She knew which rival sobers were plotting rebellion against her or the Portuguese. She knew when slave traders, desperate to avoid her taxes, tried to forge new, secret paths around her territory. Salt had become the very spine of her emerging empire. Every grain she controlled was like a whisper, carrying vital information. Every slab was a secret, a piece of the puzzle that gave her an advantage over her enemies. She wasn't just taxing a mineral, she was mining intelligence, building a kingdom on a foundation of knowledge and strategic control. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of Queen Njinga's incredible journey. Her story is a powerful reminder of how brilliance and courage can change the course of history. Hello again, and welcome back. Let's settle in by the fire for a moment. Let its warmth chase away the chill of the night, and continue our journey into the heart of Queen Njinga's kingdom. Tonight, we're not just talking about battles or politics. We're talking about the very lifeblood of her empire, something as simple and as vital as salt. Imagine this: long, winding roads carved through sun-scorched savanna and thorny plains. These were the salt roads. They weren't paved with stone, but with sweat, endurance, and the rhythmic chants of the porters. Day after day, long caravans of Mbundu men and women marched under a relentless sun. They carried heavy slabs of salt on their heads, each one balanced precariously, looking like pale, heavy tombstones against the African sky. This was no easy journey. The sun was cruel, peeling skin and cracking lips. Crocodiles, still as carved stones, lay in wait at river crossings. Bandits lurked in the tall grasses, a constant, silent threat. It was a slow, grueling march, a testament to human resilience. The porters would sing, their voices rising and falling in unison, not just to pass the time, but to keep a rhythm, to find a shared strength to put one foot in front of the other. It was a rhythm of endurance. Nothing on these roads happened by chance. Ngenga's reign was defined by order, and the salt trade was no exception. At checkpoints along the route, her officers, distinguished by their embroidered cotton tunics, would inspect every convoy. They were meticulous. They weighed the salt slabs, counted every single porter, and recorded the tallies on scrolls made from palm bark. There was a palpable tension beneath this efficiency. Every porter, every trader knew the stakes. If even one slab of salt went missing, punishment was not just a possibility, it was a certainty. And it was swift. Whispers traveled along the trade routes, carried from one caravan to the next, that Queen Nginga's justice was as silent and inevitable as the setting sun. There were no grand pronouncements, no public trials for a missing sack of salt, just a quiet, chilling finality. This fear, this strict accountability, was the invisible force that kept the entire system running smoothly. It ensured that the wealth of the land flowed where it was meant to, into the heart of her kingdom. But don't mistake this harshness for a lack of life. These roads, despite the hardship, pulsed with a unique and vibrant energy. They were the arteries of the kingdom, and along them a new culture was born. Small inns, ingeniously woven from reeds, sprang up like mushrooms after a rain. Here, weary travelers could find shelter, share a gourd of palm wine, and most importantly, exchange stories. These weren't just idle tales. They were the glue that held this moving society together. Old griots, the keepers of history and law, would sing ancient songs under the vast, starry sky. They sang that the spirits of the salt itself watched over the roads, protecting honest merchants and punishing the deceitful. They said that a liar would be blinded by mirages, forever lost in the shimmering heat, a powerful deterrent in a world built on trust. This road culture was so ingrained that it shaped people's very identities. Children born along the trail were often named after the elements they grew up with: the winds, the rivers, the seasons. Names like Nzinga, Kalunga, and Mwimvula became common, each a small tribute to the journey that defined their lives. In a way, the salt trade created a moving village, a sprawling, transient community bound together by shared thirst, shared risk, and a fragile, essential trust. It was more than commerce. It was a way of life. Let's pause here for a moment. Can you hear it? The fire crackles softly, and the stars seem brighter out here, away from the noise of the world. It's in moments like these that legends are born. And one of the most powerful legends about Njinga concerns these very roads. It's said that she didn't just rule from her palace in Kabasa. She wanted to know her kingdom from the ground up. So, she disguised herself as a simple merchant, her royal garments replaced with dusty cloth, and she walked the salt roads herself. She wanted to hear what her people truly thought, what they whispered when they believed the queen wasn't listening. Imagine her walking anonymously among the porters, sharing their meager meals, listening to their songs of hardship and hope. In the dust and the sweat, she saw her own decrees made real. She saw the bodies bent under the weight of the salt she commanded. She saw women at the market stalls, bargaining with a cunning and intelligence that rivaled any of her male advisors. She saw her own soldiers off duty, not sharpening their spears, but exchanging songs with traders from distant lands. This journey changed her. She returned to her capital, Kabasa, with a conviction that had been forged in the sun and dust of the trail. She was certain of one thing: true rule didn't come from a throne. It came from walking the same ground as the ruled, from feeling the same sun on your back and the same thirst in your throat. Her leadership was not just about issuing commands. It was about shared experience. And with this newfound perspective, she enacted one of her most brilliant reforms. She saw that salt was more than a seasoning. It was the true wealth of her kingdom. So, she made it official. Salt became currency. Under her new policy, the value of life and livelihood was measured in these heavy, pale slabs. One slab could buy you a goat. 2 slabs could purchase freedom for a prisoner. Suddenly, the very earth of her kingdom offered a path to prosperity and liberty. To standardize this new economy, she went a step further. She issued small copper tokens, each one stamped with her personal sigil, a crescent moon nestled between twin spears. This was revolutionary. It was the first organized monetary reform the interior of the kingdom had ever seen. It replaced the chaotic barter system with a clear, state-backed currency. The tokens weren't just metal. They were a symbol of her authority, her vision, and the stability she brought to her people. With every transaction, her power and influence were reinforced. Let's pause again for a moment. Let the flames dance and listen to the silence of the night. This is a good time to reflect. Njinga built an empire not just with armies, but with an idea of value, of order, of a shared destiny. But as with any great power, her success invited envy. The wealth flowing from the salt roads was immense, and others wanted a piece of it. Local chiefs, who had once been loyal allies, sharing in the profits, began to feel greedy. They started hoarding salt, trying to create their own small monopolies, and undermining Ningazi's central authority. And then there were the Portuguese. They saw Njinga's economic independence as a direct threat to their colonial ambitions. If they couldn't conquer her with armies, they would try to break her with wealth. They began offering bribes to her chiefs, shining gold and silver coins in exchange for betrayal. It was a tempting offer. The foreigner's easy coin versus the hard-earned salt of their own land. Njinga's response was masterful. She didn't just fight back with threats or force. She fought back with loyalty. A loyalty bought not with gold, but with salt and stories. She met with her allies, reminding them of their shared history, their shared culture. She reminded them that while the Portuguese coin was heavy, it carried the invisible weight of chains. Her salt, she argued, represented freedom, self-sufficiency, and the strength of their own people. She understood that a shared story was a bond far stronger than a shared purse. In this struggle, Njinga's salt monopoly transformed into something more profound. It was no longer just an economic policy. It became a powerful act of resistance. Every single slab of salt that traveled under her mark, every copper token that passed from one hand to another, was a quiet but firm refusal of conquest. It was a declaration to the Portuguese and to the world that this land, her land, would feed its own people before it ever fed the stranger. The salt roads were not just trade routes. They were lines of defiance drawn across the map, each one a testament to her unyielding will to remain free. Her economy was her fortress. And as we sit here, watching the embers glow, we see the true genius of Queen Ninga. She understood that power wasn't just about the sword. It was about the source of the water, the path of the trade, the weight of the salt. She built an empire that was strong because its foundations were dug deep into the very land it stood upon. We saw how Ninga forged a new kingdom, Matumba, a fortress built on resilience and the promise of a future free from colonial chains. But the shadow of war is long, and peace is often just a breath between storms. The Portuguese, relentless in their pursuit of wealth and dominance, were not a foe to be so easily dissuaded. The war returned, not with the crash of a sudden storm, but like a slow, creeping drought. Portuguese columns, armored and arrogant, began to advance inland once more. Their method was brutal and systematic. Any village that refused to submit to their treaties, to bend the knee to a foreign king, was burned to the ground. The smoke from these fires painted grim streaks across the Angolan sky, a constant reminder of the price of defiance. But Njinga was no longer the desperate princess fighting for a crumbling kingdom. She was a queen, a general, a strategist, whose mind had been sharpened by years of conflict. She knew a direct confrontation in an open field against the superior firepower of the Portuguese was a fool's errand. So she chose a different battlefield. Her armies didn't stand and fight. They melted into the dense forests and rugged hills they knew so well. They became ghosts in the landscape, always present yet never seen. This was a war of attrition, a test of will and endurance. Njinga's forces moved like shadows, striking not at the enemy's strength, but at their lifeline. They became masters of the strategic retreat, luring the Portuguese deeper and deeper into hostile territory, stretching their supply lines until they were as thin and fragile as a spider's thread, and then they would strike. Small, swift ambushes that would pick off stragglers, disrupt communication, and sow chaos before disappearing back into the wilderness. Njinga understood a fundamental truth about her enemy. An army, no matter how powerful, cannot fight on an empty stomach or with a parched throat. And in the sweltering heat of Central Africa, one resource was as vital as water itself. Salt. It wasn't just for flavor. It was essential for preserving food and for the very survival of soldiers marching under a punishing sun. So Njinga turned salt into her most potent weapon. She gave a devastating order. All salt depots in the path of the advancing Portuguese were to be destroyed. Not seized, not captured for her own use, but utterly annihilated. Her soldiers would raid the depots, but instead of carrying away the precious crystals, they would smash the containers, scatter the salt into the dirt, or dissolve it in rivers. It was a scorched earth policy aimed directly at the enemy's morale and physical well-being. The Portuguese were forced to march hungry and thirsty through a land that shimmered with heat, their bodies craving the very mineral that was being denied to them. In the deep, whispering forests near Ndongo's borders, Njinga's commanders refined this strategy into a form of psychological warfare. They were masters of their environment, and they used this knowledge to terrifying effect. They spread rumors that traveled faster than any army, whispers of poisoned wells and salted traps. Was the water in that stream safe to drink, or had Njinga's agents tainted it? Was that glistening patch of earth ahead a natural salt pan, or a cleverly disguised pitfall? Fear and thirst became Ninga's invisible allies. The invaders, clad in heavy armor and weighed down by their own technology, became paranoid. They couldn't distinguish truth from superstition. Every shadow held a potential threat. Every strange taste in their water sparked panic. The land itself seemed to have risen against them, orchestrated by a queen who fought not just with spears and arrows, but with rumor, smoke, and salt. Imagine the scene. Dense Angolan forest at dusk, the air thick with the hum of insects. Njinga's scouts, their bodies painted to blend with the bark of the trees, watch in silence. Below them, a column of Portuguese soldiers stumbles forward, their armor clanking, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. In the distance, a thin plume of smoke rises not from a burning village, but from a destroyed salt depot, the scent of it a bitter taunt carried on the evening breeze. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars, listening to the quiet wisdom of the night. The Portuguese campaign, which had begun with such confidence, sputtered and stalled, their advance ground to a halt, not by a decisive battle, but by 1,000 small cuts, by hunger, by thirst, and by the gnawing fear of an unseen enemy. The cost of pushing further into Njinga's territory became too high. Finally, battered and demoralized, they had no choice but to seek terms. Peace envoys were sent, not to demand surrender, but to negotiate. This time, the meeting was different. Njinga was no longer the supplicant forced to kneel in the dirt. She met the Portuguese governor on ground of her own choosing. The air was thick with the scent of dust and the sweat of a long, hard-fought campaign. When she saw that only one chair had been provided for the governor, and a cushion on the floor was offered to her, she refused to be slighted. In a now legendary act of defiance and power, she had one of her attendants kneel on all fours, creating a human throne for her to sit upon, instantly making her eye level with the governor. This single act spoke volumes. She was his equal, a sovereign ruler, not a vassal. She demanded and received a chair equal to the governor's. The negotiations that followed were not about submission, but about mutual recognition. She argued with the precision of a lawyer and the authority of a queen who had earned her power through fire and blood. The resulting treaty was a masterpiece of her diplomacy. It formally recognized her sovereignty over Matamba and parts of Ndongo, and crucially, it allowed trade to resume but on her terms. The flow of goods began again. But now, Njinga held the reins. She controlled the trade routes. She set the prices, and she regulated the flow of the most vital commodity, salt. Every single grain of salt that left her lands now carried her mark, a symbol burned into the rough sackcloth of every bag. It was a declaration to the world. This salt, this life-giving mineral, belonged to Queen Njinga. It was a tangible symbol of her economic and political power. For years after, her network didn't just survive, it thrived. Matamba, once a refugee kingdom, became the vibrant heart of a vast commercial empire. It was a crucial redistribution center for the entire region. Caravans from the distant kingdoms of the Congo and Lunda traveled for weeks to reach her capital. They brought with them the diverse riches of the continent, intricately woven raffia cloth, gleaming copper ingots, and precious ivory tusks. And when they left, they carried with them the Queen's salt, the currency of life, and a token of alliance with the powerful Queen of She masterfully turned commerce into an extension of her diplomacy. Trade agreements became treaties of friendship. Every caravan that crossed her borders strengthened her position, weaving a web of alliances that was more durable than any fortress wall. These connections, built on mutual benefit and respect, extended far beyond her immediate borders and would prove to be one of her most enduring legacies, a network of loyalty that outlived her own body. She had transformed her kingdom from a state of perpetual war to an oasis of stability and prosperity in a turbulent world. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars, letting the stories of the past settle in our hearts. Njinga reigned for decades, a constant force of stability and strength. When she finally died in her 80s, a revered and powerful elder, it is said that the land itself mourned her passing. Her people, who had known both the bitterness of defeat and the triumph of her leadership, honored her in a way that was uniquely fitting. Her tomb was sealed, not with gold or jewels, but with a massive slab of pure rock salt, meticulously carved into the shape of a throne, the very symbol of her unbending will and sovereignty. As the centuries passed, the world changed. Colonial powers carved up the continent, empires rose and fell, and the great kingdom of Ndongama Tomba eventually faded into the pages of history. But even as its borders blurred and its name was spoken less and less, a strange and beautiful legacy remained. Travelers journeying along the old, forgotten trade routes would sometimes find something glittering in the moonlight. Along the edges of these ancient paths, a thin crust of salt would appear, sparkling like scattered diamonds or frozen memories. The old men, the keepers of stories, had an explanation. They said it was the spirit of Njinga, still watching over her land. It was a reminder from the Queen, who had taught her people a profound and lasting lesson. True wealth was not found in the gold and silver stolen by foreign ships and carried across the ocean. True, enduring wealth was in the salt that stayed behind. The salt that preserved their food, that seasoned their lives, and that in the hands of a visionary queen had the power to heal the wounds of thirst and secure their freedom. It was the legacy of a queen who turned the very dust of her land into the foundation of a nation. Her story is a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit. Deep in the heart of Angola, far from the bustling courts and the red dust of Indango, lies a world of shimmering, endless white. This is Kisama. Under a relentless sun, the salt flats stretch out like a frozen ocean, their surface glinting with a pale, blinding brilliance. It's a landscape that feels otherworldly, almost alien. Travelers have long whispered that these flats are not just soil, but the very bones of the gods, laid bare the remnants of the first rains. Crystallized into the white gold of the earth, the Mbundu elders, the keepers of memory, tell a different story. They say the salt comes from tears, but not tears of sorrow. These are tears of life, the sweat of ancestors, shared in gratitude for survival, for endurance. They believe every single grain contains a story. Every shimmer reflects centuries of toil, ritual, and deep reverence. To step onto these flats is to walk among memories older than the rivers that carve through this ancient land. Caravans, guided by the stars and the hushed stories of griots, would arrive at dawn. Men and women, their bare feet wrapped in cloth for protection, tread carefully, as if not to disturb a sacred, sleeping giant. For generations, they were taught that the spirits of Kisama are ever watchful. They watch those who take without reverence and bless those who carry the salt with humility and respect. It wasn't just a place of work, it was a sanctuary. Let's pause here for a moment. Imagine the fire crackling softly as we rest beneath the vast, star-dusted African sky, listening to the echoes of these stories. The harvesting of salt here was never just extraction. It was a ceremony, a living ritual passed down through countless generations. The men would wade into the shallow, brine-filled pools, their movements deliberate and practiced. They'd scrape the crystals from the bottom with wooden tools, each one carved with ancestral symbols, connecting them to those who came before. The women followed, carrying baskets woven from reeds, each one marked with the unique sigil of their clan. They would gently lift the sparkling, heavy crystals, their motions a graceful dance of labor and respect. It was said that even the wind seemed to obey the rhythm of the harvest, blowing in measured gusts, carrying the earthy scent of the land and the profound weight of memory. And with every slab of salt that was lifted from the earth, a soft chant would rise and ripple across the flats. The words, spoken in hushed tones, would echo from worker to worker. We honor those who walked before. We honor those who will walk after. May this white stone carry our breath and our blood into eternity. This chant wasn't just for show. It created a rhythm, a vibration that bound the people to the earth. The elders believed the salt itself hummed in response, vibrating under the sun's intense heat. They warned that those who ignored the chant, who worked in silence or with a greedy heart, would feel an invisible weight pressing down on their backs, a gentle but persistent reminder that the earth never ever forgets. The process was grueling. There's no denying it. Robes, soaked with sweat, clung to their skin. Blisters formed under the sun's unrelenting gaze, a constant, burning reminder of the day's toil. But for all the hardship, there was an almost surreal beauty to it. The reflections of clouds in the shallow pools of brine created the illusion that the harvesters were walking on the sky itself. The children of the harvesters, growing up on these flats, learned from a young age to read these reflections. They could discern the depth of the water and the purity of the salt just by looking at the way the sky mirrored itself on the surface. It was a skill as essential as learning to walk. Even the journey home was steeped in ritual. A basket of salt was never just transported from one place to another. Each slab was accompanied by prayer. Offerings of palm oil, tobacco, or dried fruits would be laid along the path, small tokens of gratitude left for the spirits of the land. The travelers would whisper to the earth, "Carry us safely. Carry our ancestors." Blessing with this salt, the sacred nature of Kisama was so profound that even thieves approached with caution. Legends were told around fires about spirits that could turn a thief blind or trap them in an endless, disorienting loop of salt and sun until they collapsed from exhaustion. Those few who survived such an ordeal were said to return, transformed. Their hands marked by blisters, yes, but their hearts filled with a humbling, newfound respect for the earth's powerful generosity. Let's pause again. Take a deep breath, feel the warmth of the fire, the vastness of the night sky above, and let the weight of this history settle. Over the generations, Kisama became more than just a source of wealth. It grew into a seat of spiritual authority. Tribal leaders would come to the flats to consult for omens. They would watch the way the salt reflected the sky at dawn and dusk, listening to the song of the wind as it whistled through the crystalline ridges. Major decisions about war and peace, about alliances and marriages, were often whispered to the salt for its blessing before they were ever spoken aloud to the people. The ritual of the harvest also served to reinforce the social structure and values of the community. The elders would oversee the work, not with harsh commands, but with a calm authority, gently correcting missteps and passing on their wisdom. The young learned that labor was both a gift and a duty. It was a way to contribute, to belong, to honor the chain of life. To carry the salt without reverence was simply unthinkable. To respect it was to respect the entire lineage of a people who had survived droughts, raids, and the long shadow of colonial ambition. This white gold was their history, their identity, their resilience made tangible. It was the taste of their ancestors' tears and the promise of their children's future. Kisama was never just a place to work. It was a cathedral, a courtroom, and a spiritual battleground all rolled into one. Here, every day's harvest began not with tools, but with reverence. Imagine this: a handful of precious salt, carefully poured into a tiny, specially dug pit. Then, the rich, red hue of palm oil dribbled around it, followed by a libation of water, sprinkled with fragrant, crushed herbs, cast over the feet of the workers. These weren't just superstitious rituals. They were sacred acts, powerful threads binding the living to their ancestors, and the past to the ever-unfolding present. It was a daily renewal of a covenant with the land itself. But power, especially the kind drawn from the earth, always comes with a cost. The salt harvesters were incredibly strong, their bodies honed by years of labor under the African sun. Yet, even their immense strength couldn't erase the deep, bone-wearying exhaustion. Blistered feet would tear through their protective wraps, leaving them raw and exposed. Faces burned under the relentless, unforgiving glare of the sun. The salt flats, while breathtakingly beautiful, could also be a deadly arena. The combination of salt, intense heat, and dehydration created an unyielding trial of endurance. To succeed here, to bring in the harvest, meant constantly balancing risk with devotion, a tightrope walk between survival and faith. Think about the sheer will it took. Day after day, the workers would return, their bodies aching, their skin stinging. They knew the dangers. A misstep, a moment of inattention, could lead to severe dehydration or heat stroke. But they also knew the importance of their work. The salt they harvested was the lifeblood of their community. It was a tangible link to their heritage and a promise for their future. This wasn't just labor. It was a testament to human resilience, a profound understanding that the most valuable things in life are often earned through the greatest challenges. They were more than workers. They were warriors of the salt. Even the legendary queen Mbundu, a ruler known for her strategic genius and fierce independence, recognized the power held within Kisama's crystalline plains. She sent her own emissaries to these flats, not to conquer, but to control. She established monopolies and levied tribute, transforming the salt from a simple commodity into a powerful instrument of her statecraft. This salt didn't just season food, it funded armies that protected the Mbundu heartlands from encroaching foreign powers. It supplied markets that stretched far beyond their borders, creating a vast network of trade and influence. Kisama's salt was, in essence, the foundation of an economy and a cornerstone of political control. But this extraction came at a price, not just in human sweat, but in scars left upon the earth. Deep trenches cut across the flats like wounds. Shallow pools, once teeming with briny potential, were drained and left to dry. Over-harvesting in certain areas could leave patches of Kisama barren and lifeless for a time. The people of Kisama understood this delicate balance. They weren't just exploiting a resource, they were stewards of a fragile ecosystem. They knew that the land gave generously, but it also demanded respect. The harvesters saw themselves not as miners, but as guardians, tasked with ensuring that Kisama would continue to provide for generations yet to come. Every single step taken on the salt was a form of prayer, a delicate negotiation with the unseen world. The spirits of the land were appeased with those daily offerings of salt, oil, and herbs. The earth itself was shown respect through careful, patient scraping rather than aggressive digging. The work proceeded slowly, deliberately, with a rhythm that was almost meditative. It was as if the pace itself was an act of devotion, a physical manifestation of their reverence. They understood that to rush, to be greedy, was to invite misfortune. Even small mistakes, a careless word, a clumsy movement, were believed to bring minor curses, a bout of illness, or a string of bad luck. This belief wasn't born of fear, but of a deep, ingrained understanding that their labor and their reverence were absolutely inseparable. Imagine the scene. Mbundu women, their faces glistening with sweat, move with a practiced grace across the shallow, crystalline pools. They use traditional reed baskets to scoop the precious salt. Their movements fluid and economical. The setting sun paints the sky in vibrant shades of orange and crimson, which are perfectly reflected in the water at their feet. Beside the pools, small bundles of ceremonial herbs lie ready, a constant reminder of the spiritual dimension of their work. Each crystal they gather is more than just sodium chloride. It's a piece of their history, a prayer made solid, a testament to a hard-won harmony between humanity and nature. This sacred character of Kisama permeated every aspect of social life. It wasn't just about work. It was about community and continuity. The elders, the keepers of wisdom, would teach the younger generations the songs of endurance. These weren't just tunes to pass the time. They were powerful chants that synchronized their footsteps and movements, turning a group of individuals into a single, unified force. The lyrics reminded them that their individual effort, their personal struggle, was intrinsically bound to the survival of the entire community. One person's strength was everyone's strength. In this environment, mistakes weren't met with punishment, but were transformed into lessons. A spilled basket wasn't a loss, but an opportunity to teach about care and focus. A moment of weakness was a chance for a neighbor to offer a helping hand and a word of encouragement. And victories, like a particularly bountiful harvest, were celebrated with unrestrained joy. The community would gather, sharing songs, stories, and the sweet, fermented taste of palm wine. The harvest was never simply about profit or stockpiling a resource. It was a profound act of honoring the great, unbroken continuum of life, celebrating the ancestors who taught them, the land that sustained them, and the children who would one day walk these same sacred flats. As we reflect on this, it's clear that the story of Kisama is more than just history. It's a powerful lesson for our own time. In our modern world, we often see work as separate from the rest of our lives, and we view natural resources as commodities to be exploited for maximum profit. The people of Kisama show us a different way, a more integrated and respectful path. They teach us that our work can be a form of devotion, that community is our greatest source of strength, and that we have a sacred duty to be guardians, not just consumers, of the earth that sustains us all. Their legacy, carried in every grain of salt, is a timeless reminder of the delicate and beautiful balance between human effort and the natural world. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, it cast a breathtaking spectacle across the Kisama salt flats, transforming the vast crystalline landscape into a mesmerizing mirror of fire and shadow. Imagine this scene. Travelers, their bodies weary from a day of honest labor, making their way home. Their baskets are heavy, not just with the precious white salt, but with something far more profound: stories. Each slab of salt they carry holds within it a history, a narrative etched by the hands that harvested it. It holds the taste of sweat, a testament to their hard work. It holds the rhythm of songs sung under the African sun, melodies that have echoed across these flats for generations. And most importantly, it holds the wisdom of their elders, lessons passed down through time, a sacred inheritance. This is how Kisama was, and in many ways, still is, alive. Every single grain of salt remembers. The salt harvest was deeply woven into the very fabric of their society, intricately tied to sacred rites of passage. For the young men and women of the community, the salt flats were a proving ground. They would spend days under the relentless sun, their skin kissed by its warmth. Learning the virtues of patience and endurance, they learned the sacred rules of respect for the land, for their elders, and for the traditions that bound them together. Those who successfully completed this arduous rite earned more than just respect. They earned a new status within their tribe. They were now considered adults, ready to participate in tribal councils. Their voices now holding weight in important decisions. They became eligible for marital negotiations, ready to start families of their own. In Kisama, salt was far more than a simple commodity. Salt was education. Salt was law. And most powerfully, salt was memory. Let's just pause here for a moment. Imagine we're there, sitting by a softly crackling fire. The day's heat has subsided, replaced by a cool, gentle breeze. Above us, a blanket of brilliant stars stretches across the infinite night sky. It's in moments like these, in the quiet and the calm, that the deeper truths of this place begin to reveal themselves. The stories of the salt flats are not just about labor and tradition. They are also about a profound connection to the earth itself. Now, you might be wondering about the environmental impact of such extensive harvesting. Did they simply take until there was nothing left? The answer is a resounding no. The people of Kisama held a deep, intuitive understanding of ecological balance, a wisdom that we in the modern world are only just beginning to relearn. The environmental cost was never ignored. It was the elders and the spiritual leaders who acted as guardians of the flats. They meticulously monitored the extraction, ensuring that it never exceeded the land's natural ability to renew itself. Certain salt pools were designated to be left untouched, allowed to refill naturally with the changing tides and seasons. There were also ceremonial leave periods, sacred times during which no salt could be taken from the flats at all. These were times for the land to rest and rejuvenate. And if someone dared to disobey these sacred rules, the consequence wasn't just punishment in the conventional sense. It involved ritual correction, a process designed to heal the spiritual rift created by their transgression. This system reinforced not only a moral code, but also a profound sense of ecological stewardship. It was a beautiful symbiosis, a dance of give and take between humanity and nature. For century after century, Kisama's salt was the lifeblood of the Mbundu people. It shaped their culture, fueled their economy, and enriched their spiritual lives. Traders, embarking on long and perilous journeys, carried this white wealth across vast kingdoms. The salt fed armies, ensuring their strength in battle. It sustained communities, providing a vital nutrient and a means of preserving food. But no matter how far the salt traveled, no matter how much wealth it generated, the flats themselves remained sacred ground. They were a liminal space, a hallowed place where the divine and the mortal met. It was a world where labor was transformed into a ritual, a moving prayer offered to the earth. And it was a place where endurance, that quintessentially human virtue, was immortalized in the shimmering crystals of salt and the timeless melodies of their songs. As night fell and a deep stillness settled over the land, the community would gather, with the day's work done and the fires burning low, casting a warm, intimate glow on their faces. The stories would begin. The songs of the day, which had provided a rhythm for their labor, now echoed across the quiet flats, their notes blending with the whisper of the wind and the distant, rhythmic pulse of drums. These weren't just simple tunes. They were oral histories, epic poems set to music. They told of the ancestors, the great spirits who first discovered the salt and taught them the ways of harvesting. They spoke of the spirits of the land, the guardians of the flats who watched over them. They sang of the salt itself, a sacred substance that had flowed through human hands since time immemorial, connecting them to a past so distant it had become legend. Even today, those few travelers who are fortunate enough to wander across these ancient salt flats speak of a strange and beautiful phenomenon. They say that if you listen closely, if you quiet your mind and open your heart, you can hear whispers in the wind. These are the echoes of the long-forgotten songs of the harvesters. They are faint, ethereal melodies that seem to drift on the air, a timeless soundtrack to this sacred landscape. The locals believe these are the voices of the ancestors, still watching over their land. They say the songs guide those who approach the flats with respect and humility, showing them the way. But they also serve as a warning to those who would take from the earth without reverence, a ghostly reminder of the sacred pact that must be honored. The story of Kisama is ultimately a story of endurance. The culture, the traditions, the very spirit of the place they endured because the people endured. They faced challenges, they adapted, but they never lost their connection to the land that sustained them. The salt became their covenant, a sacred promise between them and the earth. The long, patient process of harvesting taught them a profound lesson in patience, a virtue they applied to all aspects of their lives. The salt became their legacy, a story etched not in stone, but in the white crystals of the earth and upon their own sunburned skin. It is a story of resilience, of reverence, and of a deep, abiding love for the land that gave them everything. Hello, and welcome back. As we draw closer to the heart of our story, let's step inside the very center of the Mbundu kingdom of Mbundu. Picture this. Rising like a gleaming jewel from the earth is the royal palace. This isn't a structure of cold stone, but of sun-baked clay walls and polished timber, a living, breathing part of the land itself. Its roof, thatched from reeds gathered along distant rivers, is a masterpiece. Each layer is woven with intricate patterns, a visual tapestry representing the kingdom's ancestral lineage, a story told in every strand. As we cross the threshold, the air itself tells a story. The corridors smell of smoke from ceremonial fires, rich oil used to polish the wooden beams, and the faint, sweet scent of beeswax. The halls are always polished, maintained with meticulous care, not just for cleanliness, but as a reflection of divine order and the stability of the realm. Every surface shines, every corner is tended to, because the palace is a mirror of the kingdom's soul. Within the grand hall, the heart of power, ivory thrones sit upon low platforms. These are not mere seats. They are historical records, each one carved with incredible detail, depicting scenes of past rulers, legendary battles, and bountiful harvests. Here, the king and queen sit beneath ornate canopies, symbols of their sacred authority. They are attended by nobles dressed in robes of dyed raffia and fine cloth, their status declared by collars beaded with copper and lustrous shells. In this space, every gesture is a dance, a carefully choreographed movement with deep meaning. Every glance is a symbol, a message sent and received without a word. Power here isn't shouted from the rooftops. It is spoken softly, in measured movements and ancient, ritualized protocol. It's a world where silence often speaks louder than words. Now, let's follow the aromas to the royal kitchens, a symphony of organized activity. Here, slaves and servants move with a quiet, practiced precision. They carry gourds of frothy palm wine, platters of roasted grains, and succulent roasted meats destined for the royal table. Cooks, crouched low, crushed spices between smooth stones, releasing a fragrant cloud of pepper, lemongrass, and smoked fish into the air. Every meal prepared is more than just food. It is an offering to the throne, a tangible symbol of the wealth, abundance, and meticulous organization that underpins the entire kingdom. Each dish is a testament to the land's bounty and the court's ability to command and distribute it. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars, listening to the distant hum of the palace, a heartbeat in the quiet of the night. Life for the young nobles within these walls is a constant education, beginning at dawn. They are not just taught to fight, but to live within the intricate web of courtly life. They learn the precise way to bow, the exact depth and duration that shows proper respect without seeming subservient. They are trained to speak in measured, calm tones, for an outburst of emotion is a sign of weakness. Most importantly, they learn to interpret the subtle gestures of their elders, a flick of the wrist, a slight nod, a shift in posture. Each is a piece of a complex puzzle they must solve to navigate their world. Music is the palace's lifeblood, its constant heartbeat. The rhythms of drums and the melodic notes of xylophones echo through the corridors, keeping a steady cadence for the day's activities. But this is not just background noise. Each note has a specific meaning. A certain drum pattern might announce the arrival of a high-ranking dignitary. Another could signal the beginning of a festival. And a sudden, sharp rhythm could warn of approaching danger. The music is a language understood by all within the palace walls. Courtiers whisper that the greatest power of all is subtlety. The queen, a figure of immense influence, often walks barefoot along the polished floors. Her silent steps allow her to observe the court unseen. Her eyes are constantly scanning, not just for threats, but for opportunities, a loyal servant to reward, a budding alliance to nurture, a rival's ambition to gently redirect. A warm smile from her could secure a family's fortune, while a single, raised eyebrow could wither the ambitions of the most powerful noble. The palace is a grand chessboard, and every soul within it, from the highest noble to the lowest servant, is a piece to be observed, protected, or strategically moved. Let's move now to the king's audience chamber. This is where the kingdom officially meets the outside world. The room is filled with a soft, dappled light, filtered through intricately woven reed windows. These shafts of sunlight strike the ivory carvings on the thrones and walls, casting long, dancing shadows across the polished floor. It is a space designed to inspire awe and respect. Here, diplomats, traders, and emissaries arrive from far and wide. They come from the bustling ports of Luanda, from the sprawling inland marketplaces, and from caravans that have crossed vast distances, even from the distant kingdom of the Congo. They come bearing gifts, tokens of respect and currency for negotiation, gleaming copper ingots, bolts of finely woven cloth, strings of colorful beads, and sometimes the most precious commodity of all, salt, laboriously mined from the salt pans of Kisa. In return, they leave with what they came for: royal permission to trade, newly forged alliances, or perhaps a subtle, carefully worded admonishment from the king. Every interaction is a delicate negotiation, reinforcing the king's authority as the ultimate arbiter of commerce and politics in the region. For the elite who live within the palace, life is a blend of luxury and ritual. Their daily routines are governed by tradition. Their baths are not simple tubs, but are lined with smooth clay and scented with crushed herbs and flowers. The palm mats they sleep on are works of art, embroidered with vivid scenes of brave warriors, skilled hunters, and powerful river spirits. The floors of their chambers are swept continuously, not just for hygiene, but to maintain a state of purity. Attendants move silently through the hallways, fanning incense to cleanse the air and honor the spirits. Even sleep is a structured, ritualized act. Each chamber is aligned according to ancestral traditions. The placement of sleeping mats, blankets, and even personal drums is determined by omens, spiritual guidance, and the positions of the stars. Every aspect of life, from bathing to sleeping, is imbued with meaning, connecting the inhabitants of the palace to their ancestors and the cosmos. Let's pause here again. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars, imagining this world where every detail is part of a larger, sacred design. In the Mbundu court, intelligence and wisdom were valued just as highly as physical strength. A great warrior was respected, but a wise counselor was revered. Nobles spent years studying the histories of neighboring kingdoms, memorizing the complex genealogies of their own and other royal lines, and learning to read the signs of the natural world, the direction of the wind, the currents of the river, the flight of a birdle, were seen as messages from the spiritual realm that a wise leader must understand. Life in the court was a high-stakes game of strategy. A minor misstep in etiquette, a poorly chosen word, or a misread social cue could result in disgrace or even exile. Conversely, a single, well-chosen word, a clever observation, or a timely piece of advice could secure a lifetime of favor and influence. To live and thrive in the palace was to master the arts of patience, keen observation, and quiet persuasion. It was about knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to simply watch and wait. The authority of the throne, however, was not confined within the palace walls. Its influence radiated outwards, touching every corner of the kingdom. Leaders of vassal tribes and distant towns regularly sent envoys to the capital. These delegations came to pay tribute, a formal acknowledgement of the king's power. They came to seek mediation in disputes, relying on the king's wisdom to maintain peace. And they came to negotiate marriages, weaving new threads into the political and social fabric of the kingdom. The court's unwavering attention to ceremony was the key to its power. It ensured that respect flowed naturally from the governed to the governors. It wasn't a system based purely on force, but on a shared understanding of tradition and order. Every feast, every drumbeat, every ritual was a public performance, a powerful reminder to everyone, from the common farmer to the visiting diplomat, that the kingdom's cohesion, its very existence, relied on the meticulous observance of tradition and decorum. It was this deep respect for the old ways that held the world of Ndango together. Step outside the grand walls of the palace with me, and you'll find yourself in the bustling heart of the kingdom, the marketplace. Picture it, the air is thick with the smells of spices and dust, alive with the sounds of 100 conversations at once. This isn't just a place to buy and sell. It's the kingdom's central nervous system. Traders have come from far and wide, from neighboring Ndongo and Matamba, and even from distant ports we can only imagine. Their stalls are piled high with vibrant textiles, gleaming copper ingots, hefty slabs of salt, and beautifully crafted goods. Every transaction, every negotiation, is a thread in the vast tapestry of the kingdom's economy. But look closer. Among the merchants haggling over prices and the porters carrying their heavy loads, there are others. These are the eyes and ears of the palace. The elite maintain their grip on power not just through wealth, but through information. A network of spies, disguised as ordinary folk, moves through the crowds. They observe every deal, listen to every whispered rumor, and note every furtive glance. In this world, a friendly smile could be a mask for a brewing plot. A simple nod could signal a secret allegiance. Nothing is ever just what it seems. The flow of information was constant and ingenious. It wasn't just spies. The whole system was designed for intelligence gathering. Slaves and servants, often overlooked, were crucial conduits. A message might be hidden within a basket of fruit, a secret whispered as they passed each other in a crowded lane. This intelligence would find its way back to the palace, delivered to scribes who meticulously recorded every detail. It's said that Queen Ninga herself was a master of this art. She would send children from the royal court, her own wards, into the marketplace. Disguised as young vendors or errand runners, they weren't just playing, they were learning. They were training their eyes to see what others missed, to listen, to be brave, and to understand the subtle currents of human behavior. This practice shows us something profound. The palace and the market were not separate worlds. They were two sides of the same coin, perfect reflections of each other. One projected the kingdom's authority, while the other gathered the intelligence needed to maintain it. They were intertwined, each one giving life and strength to the other. As dusk settles and the market quiets down, the work in the palace is far from over. In quiet, lamplit chambers, the Queen's most trusted courtiers and advisors gather. This is where the raw data from the day is transformed into strategy. Spread out on tables are charts detailing the salt trade, ledgers recording tribute payments from vassal chiefs, and scribbled notes containing rumors from the kingdom's farthest borders. Every piece of information is examined with painstaking care. There are no rash decisions here. The process is deliberate, built on layers of accumulated wisdom. A report of a poor harvest in a northern province isn't just a piece of agricultural news. It might signal potential unrest or an opportunity for a rival to gain influence. A sudden drop in the price of copper could indicate a new trade route opening up, one that needs to be controlled or co-opted. The courtiers weigh each factor, debating the potential outcomes of every possible action. This is a delicate dance of strategy, loyalty, and foresight. The goal is to weave together these disparate threads of information into a coherent plan that will protect and strengthen the kingdom. It's in these quiet, evening sessions that the fate of the Mbundu people is truly decided. Now, let's consider another aspect of court life, one that might seem like simple entertainment: leisure. But in the court of the Mbundu elite, even leisure was deeply political. Music and dance were not just for enjoyment. They were a form of communication, a language in itself. Every rhythm, every movement, every note carried meaning. A drumbeat at an unexpected moment could be a prearranged signal, a warning of a threat that only the initiated would understand. Imagine a formal gathering with a visiting dignitary from another kingdom. A song performed slightly off-key or a dance step executed incorrectly wouldn't just be an artistic failure. It could be interpreted as a grave insult, a deliberate slight with serious diplomatic consequences. Because of this, the nobles and members of the court trained rigorously, not just in statecraft and warfare, but in rhythm and tone. They had to master the fine art of communication through cultural performance. A well-executed dance could convey respect, strength, and hospitality all at once, forging alliances more effectively than any treaty. It was a sophisticated system where art and politics were one and the same. Even the most serene spaces within the palace walls held a deeper purpose. The palace gardens were not vast, sprawling landscapes, but small, carefully tended sanctuaries. Here, trusted attendants cultivated medicinal herbs and rare exotic plants. These gardens were a living pharmacy, a diplomatic tool, and a sacred space all in one. The herbs were used to heal the elite, their knowledge a closely guarded secret that reinforced their special status. When important guests arrived, they might be welcomed with a gift of a rare flower or a soothing herbal infusion. A gesture of hospitality that also subtly showcased the court's wealth and sophistication. Furthermore, many of these plants were used in important rituals, connecting the court to the spiritual world and reinforcing its sacred authority. Every plant had a story, a symbolic meaning. Some were believed to preserve life or promote fertility, their presence in the garden a prayer for the well-being of the kingdom. Others served as a quiet reminder to all who walked there of the court's dual power rights, command over both the temporal, earthly realm and the sacred, spiritual one. The gardens were a microcosm of the court's philosophy, a place of beauty, healing, and profound, unspoken power. When you bring all these elements together, you begin to see the intricate web of life for the Mbundu elite. Information, power, and symbolism were not separate concepts. They were seamlessly intertwined in every aspect of daily existence. Survival and success in this world depended on a heightened state of awareness, on discipline, and on understanding that nothing was without meaning. Think about it. The way a cup of palm wine was offered, the specific pattern of a folded mat on the floor, even the direction the smoke from incense drifted, all these seemingly minor details could hold significance. They were part of a complex, unspoken language that everyone in the court was expected to understand. Living in this environment required constant attention and a deep appreciation for nuance. It was a world where observation was as critical as any weapon. Ultimately, the court was a reflection of the kingdom itself. Its daily rhythms were guided by the core principles of balance, keen observation, respect for tradition, and strategic thinking. It was a demanding, high-stakes environment, but for those who mastered its intricate rules, the rewards were immense. They held the power to shape the destiny not just of their own court, but of entire peoples, influencing the course of history in this dynamic and powerful corner of Central Africa. The true height of the court's display, its most vibrant expression, was found in its festivals. Imagine the energy. Celebrations erupted to mark a bountiful harvest, a decisive victory in battle, or the solemn honoring of ancestors. The air itself would thrum with the thunder of drums, a deep, resonant heartbeat that echoed through the hills. Dancers, adorned in intricate costumes, would spin in whirls of color and motion, their movements telling stories as old as the kingdom itself. And the scent, the rich, nutty aroma of roasted grain and palm oil would waft from the kitchens, filling every hall and courtyard, a promise of the feast to come. Guests from far-off lands, emissaries from neighboring kingdoms, or traders from across the sea would watch with wide-eyed awe. They witnessed the Mbundu elite demonstrate not just opulence, but precision, elegance, and a profound understanding of ritual. It was a spectacle that was both deeply entertaining and undeniably commanding. The feasts themselves were legendary, lengthy affairs that were meticulously organized, a testament to the court's discipline and attention to detail. These were not simply meals. They were grand, orchestrated performances. Enormous platters, laden with roasted fish fresh from the rivers, hearty grains, and vibrant, sweet fruits, would arrive in carefully timed stages. Each course wasn't just served, it was announced, often accompanied by a specific drum rhythm or a song that held cultural significance. Every toast was an exercise in diplomacy, a carefully worded tribute that could smooth over old tensions or cement new alliances. It was over these shared meals that the real work of the kingdom often took place. Alliances were forged, disputes were eased, and loyalty was rewarded through these choreographed moments of communion and generosity. Often, during the feast, a hush would fall over the crowd. The queen or king would rise, and their presence alone was enough to command the absolute attention of every single person present. Their words were few, but carried immense weight, each one chosen with purpose. Their gestures were precise and deliberate, imbued with meaning. An observer skilled in the court's ways knew that a slight, almost imperceptible smile could signify a promising new alliance, while a momentary narrowing of the eyes could mean a lost opportunity or a subtle warning. The entire court, from the highest noble to the newest attendant, was attuned to these cues. This was leadership expressed not through booming decrees, but through the quiet, powerful language of presence and intention. The education of the young nobles was deeply experiential, and participation in these very festivities was a core part of their training. It was here they learned the intricate tapestry of court life. They memorized which foods were served in which order, a sequence steeped in tradition and symbolism. They learned how to observe the complex rules of etiquette, how to address an elder versus a foreign dignitary, how to eat with grace and restraint. Most importantly, they learned the silent language of the court, how to interpret the subtle gestures of the monarch and the senior courtiers. Mistakes were inevitable for the young and inexperienced, but they were treated as instructive moments. They were corrected with quiet patience by mentors who had themselves spent a lifetime mastering this art of subtle rule, ensuring the wisdom of the court was passed down intact from one generation to the next. But court life wasn't all grand ceremony and public display. In the quieter moments, away from the drums and the dancers, the real work of the mind took place. Courtiers would retreat to palace chambers, meditating in the cool, still air. They would reflect on the kingdom's history, on the lineage of their ancestors, and on the heavy responsibilities of governance that rested on their shoulders. These were periods of intense study. They would pore over hand-drawn maps, tracing trade routes and territorial boundaries. They pored over trade logs, analyzing the flow of goods and wealth. They studied complex genealogies, understanding the web of relationships that connected the kingdom's powerful families. They understood a fundamental truth. Knowledge was power, but it was a blunt instrument on its own. True influence came only when knowledge was coupled with wisdom, the foresight to anticipate future challenges, and the patience to act at precisely the right moment. The palace, therefore, was so much more than a home for the royal family. It was a crucible, a high-pressure environment designed to forge rulers, diplomats, and priests. It was a testing ground where character was revealed and strengthened. Life within the court's walls demanded an extraordinary set of skills: grace under constant scrutiny, courage under immense pressure, and a deep, intuitive understanding that every single word, every step, every glance carried weight and meaning. There were no throwaway gestures or careless comments in the Mbundu court. Everything was communication. Everything was politics. It was a life of constant performance, where the fate of thousands could rest on one's ability to navigate its intricate currents with skill and composure. The Mbundu court, and by extension the kingdom, endured for so long because it masterfully harmonized what might seem like opposing forces. It balanced raw strength with profound subtlety, immense wealth with sacred ritual, sharp intelligence with keen instinct. The kingdom thrived not solely through military conquest, though it was certainly capable of defending itself. It thrived through the deliberate cultivation of a society that revered both its ancient traditions and its own people. This was a leadership that understood that true power wasn't just held, it was earned, maintained through a delicate dance of authority, respect, and shared cultural identity. The well-being of the kingdom was seen as a reflection of the court's wisdom and balance. Even today, centuries later, when storytellers gather and speak of the old kingdoms, the tales of the Mbundu elite are told with a special reverence. They don't just speak of a place of power and wealth. They speak of a court that was alive. They describe it as a living, breathing organism of discipline, ceremony, and a quiet, commanding power that emanated from its very core. Here, life itself was an education. Every festival, every feast, every quiet moment of study was a lesson. And every citizen, from the highest noble to the humblest farmer, was in their own way a student in the subtle, enduring art of leadership. The sun has set over the lands of Ndongo and Kaisama, leaving behind a tapestry of color and shadow that stretches across plains, valleys, and salt flats. The roads the Mbundu traders walked now glimmer faintly in memory, lined with the sweat and perseverance of those who carried the weight of survival on blistered feet. Even now, the salt crystals, once lifted by hands bent in toil, seem to whisper the songs of ancestors, a hymn of labor, ritual, and dignity. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The salt flats of Kisama lie silent, yet they are alive. The spirits of the harvesters and elders linger in every glinting surface, reminding all who passed that endurance is sacred. Each grain of salt carries the story of those who walked, bled, and prayed across that endless whiteness, honoring the ancient covenant between human and earth. They remind us that wealth is more than trade, that power is more than gold. It is the rhythm of labor, the discipline of care, and the reverence for life itself. Beyond the flats, the court of the Mbundu thrived in its ordered elegance. Imagine ivory thrones, ceremonial feasts, and whispered intelligence painting a picture not of mere opulence, but of a society that understood balance. The king and queen, their courtiers, and the spies in the marketplace all performed a delicate choreography of governance. They taught lessons not with harsh decrees, but with subtlety, observation, and ritual. Power was woven into every gesture, every word, every breath taken beneath the thatched roofs and golden sunlight. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. Even as centuries passed, the essence of this society endured. Knowledge, wisdom, and respect for the earth and its bounty were passed down in stories and songs. The younger generation, walking the same roads and tending the same flats, learned patience and humility. They came to understand that true legacy was not found in monuments or riches, but in the memories preserved through action, through endurance, and through the quiet dedication to principles much older than kingdoms themselves. The life of a salt trader, blistered and sunburned, was inseparable from the rhythm of the land, and the palace, resplendent with its own rituals and ceremonies, was inseparable from the soul of the people it governed. Both taught the same truth, that every hardship endured, every responsibility accepted, and every act performed with mindfulness contributes to the story of a people, to the continuity of culture, and to the honoring of ancestors who guide the present from the shadows of the past. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The roads and the flats, the marketplaces and the palaces, they are all threads in a single, magnificent tapestry. As night deepens, the stars themselves seem to echo the pulse of these lives. The sweat of laborers, the whispers of spies, the songs of elders, the gestures of nobles all converge into a single rhythm, steady and eternal. It's a rhythm that reminds us that human endurance and devotion, whether in toil or in governance, shape the world far beyond the reach of any empire or crown. Now, as you listen to my voice, you might feel the weight of these journeys, the shimmer of the salt and the whisper of the courts. Feel the dignity in every footstep, the grace in every gesture, and the subtle authority in every quiet act of leadership. These are the echoes of the past, alive in the present, guiding the future. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. So we close this chapter in the story of Angola's Mbundu traders, their sacred salt, and the delicate power of their rulers. May the endurance of those who carried salt across blazing plains inspire patience in your own life. May the wisdom of the palace remind us that true authority is subtle, disciplined, and just. And may the spirits of Kisama and Ndongo remain in your memory, whispering lessons older than time. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If these stories resonate with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It helps us continue to share these tales from under the baobab. Until next time, you are now under baobab skies.